start with the good news. Inflation is the lowest it's been since 2021. Um,
Woo!
yeah. So that means a couple things, but the big thing right out of the gate is the Feds have been waiting to lower the interest rates because they jacked them up to whatever they're 5.25 now. If they lower them, they might lower them a half a point, which would be 4.75. In September, they might do it again later in the year, but that means your credit card bills are going to go down. It means the ability to buy a house is going to be cheaper, buy a car eventually is going to be cheaper. Businesses can get loans, so it's going to be more economic growth. So more cash in the system for people to spend is essentially what we're talking about. But I want to jump into the report because, yep, inflation report came out and it was all good news.
Tonight, a big sign that help for inflation-weary consumers is on the way.
Has the U.S. beat inflation, Mr. President?
Yes. I told you we're going to have a soft landing. We're going to have a soft landing.
President Biden touting the new numbers out today showing that for the first time since March 2021, inflation has dropped below 3%. Consumer prices rose just 2.9% compared to last year. Inflation clearly retreating from the peak of just over 9% 2 years ago. And prices for airfares, used cars, and apparel are falling. And inflation at the grocery store has improved dramatically. But weary Americans like Jennifer Bryant from Arkansas say they...
So before we get into that, all that is great news. Great news. 2.9% from last year.
Yeah, honestly, and listen, that's such good news because it's been, creeping and now it's going the right direction and we can look forward to some rate cuts finally.
Mm-hmm.
Stop feeling choked in that respect.
Well,
so I'm super...
Yeah, that and prices are not going to outpace us anymore like they were before. Now wages are growing faster. That means more of us are going to have more money in our pocket to spend. So improved quality of life, improved everything all around. But the nice thing is it's the target, like the Fed wants it to be, is like around 2.5, right? Realistically speaking, historically, inflation is about 3.7% a year in this country annually. So if you're right around 2.5 to 3, you're kind of already in the sweet spot, comparing it to growth. So yeah, it's kind of a Goldilocks moment. When Biden gets up and says, I told you we're going to have a soft landing, what he's talking about is in finance, the term soft landing means, okay, we had a high inflationary period. We had a lot of risks or fears of a recession potentially because of that. And a soft landing is, well, instead of us having a recession and things being really bad for 6 months to a year, a soft landing is everything kind of calms down and goes back to normal and you don't notice the difference. Inflation.
What better could we ask?
Yeah, no market crash, no negative GDP growth. Everything's going to stay pretty good, and there's no indication that we're having any headwinds on GDP or the markets.
I just have to take a moment to point out things have been pretty good for us under Biden. I don't know what everybody's griping about. Like, he may not be anybody's favorite guy. Like, he's not the most progressive. He's, kind of an old school Democrat and whatever. But you know what? Things have been good under his watch.
Well, so far...
He really has a bunch of stuff up.
So far, he's been the most progressive president we've ever had, which is funny from a guy who got all his donations and money from the credit card industry and was never known as a progressive when he was in Congress.
Well, that's what I say. When I say not progressive, I don't even mean like what he's literally done, but he's
Yeah.
never had the reputation. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
When you think of progressive Democratic types of potential presidents, you certainly wouldn't have been throwing Joe Biden philosophically into that.
Not typically,
You
no.
know?
But he actually has been. And the upside is it's just a fact. Job growth is better, the markets do better, GDP does better under Democratic presidents. That's just been the trend in the last 40 years, 50 years.
I feel like we need to get that really nailed into people's heads, though, because for whatever reason, people cannot seem to figure that out. They cannot connect the dots on that. They
Yeah.
seem to think that it's opposite, and I have no idea where that comes from, other than maybe some alternative facts, to use
Yeah.
that phrase. But it's just not. It's not true. I don't know why people can't connect the idea though.
Well, I mean, there's this historic sort of thing about the Republicans or conservatives are better on finances or on the money issues, when in fact they're the ones who ran up the national debt the most. In fact, we've had the only presidents to reduce the deficit in the last 40 years were Biden, Obama, and Clinton. All the Republican presidents raised it. So they jacked up the national debt. Now, I don't think that's a huge issue. There are people that will argue, though, the national debt gets too high compared to GDP, it'll be stifling and cause huge inflationary problems. I mean, that might be true. We haven't seen it yet. I don't think it will be, but there are people that believe that. But the thing about it is, if you believe that and you're a conservative, well, then the Republican president's the one that's going to fuck you over there, not the Democratic one, because they're the ones trying to decrease the deficit so they can start, hopefully get to a surplus and pay down some of the debt. But last time we had that was Clinton. So it's just, but I think a lot of it too is, part of it is just how people think. They've had the marketing that we're better on it and Democrats are reckless, and the tax and spend liberal thing has been going on for years. And the other part of it too is I think people are like, well, they keep proposing all these cuts and cuts and cuts all the time, and the Democrats don't do that. They propose spending. Well, it must be the Democrats are being irresponsible because they never propose these cuts. But it's like, well, if you look at what they're cutting programs like food stamps and stuff like that, Social Security, which wouldn't help the budget in any way, shape, or form. If you have a problem where you're at a deficit, like your own personal budget, if you're at a deficit of $1,000 a month that you're overspending and you're taking it out on credit, you're like, okay, I'm gonna make a cut. I'm gonna get 1% milk instead of 2% and save that extra 25 cents. And then you turn around and you go out and buy lobster. You didn't help your budget. But I made the cut. That's exactly what Republicans are doing. Yeah, we'll cut, Medicare or Medicaid, but then we're going to double the military budget. Or we'll cut these things, but then instead of paying them off, we'll do a huge tax giveaway for the rich, like Trump did, $1 trillion tax giveaway for billionaires, millionaires. So it's one of those things where it doesn't make any sense, but people think it. You're right. More than half of Americans think the Republicans are better with money. It's just never proven true. Not in our lifetime.